Okay, good evening, Ali. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Welcome. How are you?
Hello, Judah. Thanks for having me. I'm doing fine. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's been a while since I made my last episode, but I'm pretty thrilled about this one because I was uh, pretty excited to interview you because it seems like you have a lot of knowledge, and I mean, you speak three languages, and you're like into neuroscience, and that just felt like a jackpot for me. So I was super. That was awesome to meet you, and I'm happy to be doing this interview. So, like, first things first, can you introduce yourself for our listeners? Yeah, like,
Yeah, of course. I'm Ali. I'm 17 years old from Persia, and I'm really interested in neuroscience, which I'm studying right now for the International Neuroscience Olympiad. And I've already won a national silver medal in the National Neuroscience Olympiad in my country. And I'm also really into learning languages, and I can already speak Persian, which is my native language, and also English and Spanish pretty fluently.
awesome. So, yeah, so like one of the things that struck me so much when we started chatting was how good your English was, and I was like, so many people, especially when you live in like a community, like it's not like everyone speaks English in Persia, right? So, like,
Yeah.
how were you able to achieve such a high level despite being like so far away from all like the English speaking countries and things like that?
Um, well, one of the things I do pretty much every day is, interacting with the English language because like pretty much 100% of the videos I watch on YouTube every day are in English, and also I I really practice the British pronunciation.
Yeah, we can all hear it. It's awesome.
Yeah, because um, I think pronunciation when you're learning a language is really important, and so I pretty much also um, sometimes talk with myself in English and think in English, and sometimes I think I'm even more comfortable thinking in English because pretty much everything that I interact with every day is in English.
Okay, so even despite like being like in a Persian speaking environment, like it's you still manage to be able to get surrounded by English and kind of immerse yourself in that because like I mean that whether that's like via the internet or like you said, like even just talking to yourself, like I do that all the time in French, but yeah, my French is not nearly as good as your English. So but yeah, those are good tips. So what's your background in neuroscience? That's what I'm really curious about. Like, how long have you been studying it and how? Because I mean, a lot of high schools don't just offer a course that's like neuroscience. Like, I couldn't do that at my school. So, how have you been studying that?
Well, around I think 2 years ago, um, I found out about this international neuroscience Olympiad, which is called Brain B, and so that was how I became interested in neuroscience, especially when I read more about how the brain functions and how interesting it is really, and how can I help people in the future if I pursue this neuroscience career in the future. And as you said, high schools here don't offer a neuroscience course, and Olympiads we either have chemistry or biology, but not specifically neuroscience. So yeah, it's pretty much international. It's just the international Olympiad. But before going to that Olympiad, you have to win a gold medal in the national neuroscience Olympiad in your country.
Wow, that's incredible. So, like, how many people are participating in this in Persia?
In Persia, well, I know the numbers are pretty much around maybe 4,000 to 5,000 people in the first stage. And of course, in the next stage, that will reduce to 30 people with the highest scores. And then between those 30 people, of course, one of them would go for the international one.
That's incredible. Yeah, so congratulations on that, because that's impressive.
Thank you.
So have you said, or have you thought that your study in neuroscience and your language learning, have they been at all, like, has neuroscience helped you to better understand how you learn these languages, or even not just how your brain learns? Like, have they been complementary in any way? So yeah.
I would say indirectly complementary, because I already know how the brain functions and how we speak the language, what brain regions are involved in speaking the language. For example, two most important brain centers in our brain, which are responsible for our language. One of them is the Broca's area, which is located in the left frontal lobe, which is responsible for producing speech. So it helps you to speak. Whereas the Wernicke's area, which is located in the temporal lobe, your left temporal lobe, is responsible for language comprehension. And so it helps you understand the language. And of course, these two also have connections with each other. So yeah, knowing about how the brain works, not only in language, but in almost every other aspect, really helps me, not just with language, but just every other daily life activities.
Yeah, because I mean, like, there's not much that people do that isn't connected to neuroscience. Like, you can't do anything without your brain. So
exactly.
So would you know, like, how would you say, like, a multilingual brain like yours that can, that can process and understand and produce 3 different languages, like Persian, Spanish, and English, how would you say that differs from, like, someone's brain who can only speak one language? Like, yeah, what kinds of benefits to your brain, or even just small differences would that have?
So yeah, it definitely has a lot of benefits, a multilingual brain, and especially the more languages you learn, it will have more benefits. So one of the benefits that the multilingual brain has is actually helping you in carrying out your executive functions much better than other people, and that is kind of related with also the working memory, which is kind of the memory that you have for carrying out everyday life activities in everyday life. And also that Charlemagne, Holy Roman Emperor, had a really nice quote. He said that to have a second language is to have a second soul. And so I would say, a second character. And so, yeah, it definitely helps you to, because your brain becomes more efficient, and even the gray matter, which includes your neurons and synapses in your brain, it becomes more dense. You would have a much higher density of gray matter, a multilingual brain, comparing it to a monolingual brain. And the interesting fact about this is that it also delays the onset of the Alzheimer's disease. So a person who speaks, who's either bilingual or speaks even more languages, would have much better cognitive outcome when, for example, when he have suffered from let's say, a ischemic stroke, and or even the Alzheimer's disease that I told you. And so that's because that is related to the fact that I told you that the multilingual brain has much higher cognitive reserve because of literally more brain, more gray matter that they have in their brains.
I had no idea.
And so it will delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease by almost 4 to 5 years. And so that's pretty much a great difference.
Yeah, that's huge. So yeah, like, I knew, like, some of the basics around that, but I didn't know at all that, like, your brain, like, the gray matter, it actually gets, like, denser, so that there's actually, like, like more in there. But yeah, so yeah, that's incredible. So, and you've been you've been studying English for since you were 7, right? If I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah.
Um, so how would you say that learning English has and will help you in kind of your pursuit of this education and in and so you said you were going to do like a international competition, and I know you said that a lot of the test was all in English at the second stage previously before the interview. So so kind of how would you say that has been uh, the biggest benefits of English, and what do you think they will be in your future?
Well, definitely in the 21st century, I think English should be one's priority in life. If you know a person wants to be successful on the international stage in the future, especially when you want to study in another country, especially the Anglophone countries. And so yeah, because like most of the references, I would say, um, all of them are in English for neuroscience, for pretty much everything else, for all the sciences. So English is the first language in science in the world, and all the publications, all the articles, all of them are in English. And as you said, in the second stage uh, of our Olympiad, we had tests in English. So yeah, of course, I think you must learn English for pursuing that career.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of native English speakers like myself often take it for granted, like how fortunate we are, and also like how much work everyone else has to put in just to be able to access like the large like body of knowledge that is like whether it's textbooks or the internet or just YouTube. Like it's a it's a lot of work, and um, but yeah, it's I think it's important to look at how other people from other countries learn English as well, because there are still benefits and things that as an English speaker that I can't reach because I don't speak a certain language. Like for example, a lot of scientific knowledge I've heard is also kind of locked up in German, and a lot of
Exactly.
scientists have a working knowledge of German so that they can access that research. So that's I think really important for us to keep remembering that there never ceases to be benefits, even if our first language is English. But um, so what does it take to become a neuroscientist? Like, I'm assuming that's what you'd like to do for a career. Like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. So what kind of steps are you going to have to take educationally, like post-secondary, like university, and kind of how do you plan to go about doing that?
Well, at the moment, sorry, at the moment, I haven't still chosen, exactly in which university I want to study, but I would definitely prefer the top universities in neuroscience around the world. And so, and also the fact that neuroscience has, many branches. For example, another one would be neurology, which is associated with medicine. Also neuropsychiatry, neuropsychology. There are many things out there. So, but I think the thing that I'm going to pursue, I haven't chosen yet, but it would be associated with the science, the neuroscience, and maybe even more with the biology of how our brain works. And but pretty much everything, all of them are really cool and really interesting. So I haven't chosen yet.
Yeah, cool. So are they going to be doing the international Olympiad like in future years, and do you plan on participating again?
Well, right now, due to the coronavirus pandemic, it's not certain whether they will be the next year, whether there will be an exam for this Olympiad or not. But this year, because I won the silver medal and not the gold medal, I wasn't able to go to the States for the Olympiad, but they canceled that. They even canceled that because of the pandemic, and it's going to be online. So yeah, my goal was to go to the States and have my higher education there. So hopefully, I hope that in next year there will be an exam, but we're not sure. But I would be happy if that happens, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, I had another question that I kind of forgot to mention about how language like changes your brain, but and it was, how is acquiring a first language for babies and like young children different from how we learn second and third languages later in life?
That's an excellent question, and yeah, it's pretty much different because as I told you, we have the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area in the brain. So what happens is there's a difference between learning a language much younger in life than much later in life. So the people who learn the language much later in life will have, as a second language, when they learn a second language, they will have, a spatially isolated part of Broca's area as a second language, and other parts for the first language. So they will be distinct, pretty much distinct. But for the people who learn it much earlier in life, for early learners who learn a second language, the part of the brain, the part in Broca, that will be pretty much the same part. So that means that when you, for example, talk in that second language, the part of your brain that is activated would be for the first language and for the second language, both of them would be the same part in Broca's area. But for those people who learn it later in life, it would be pretty much distinct. But for the Wernicke's area, there's a different story. In contrast, there's an overlap between first language and second language area in Wernicke's area, regardless of age that you learn the language. And that's pretty much interesting because, as I said, Broca's area is responsible for producing the language when you talk in that language, the speaking part. But the Wernicke's area is for comprehension when you listen to that language. So that means that even if you learn the language much later in life, the part of the brain that gets activated when you listen to the language and you want to comprehend it, you want to understand it, would be pretty much the same area. But when you want to talk it, it would be a different area in the Broca's area for the first and the second language. So that's pretty much interesting how these parts of the brain are different in certain parts of speaking language.
Oh, okay. So like learning a second language later in life, so it's going to be a very isolated part of the Broca's area, right?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
But then say if you like grew up speaking two languages, like some friends that I know grew up speaking French and English, that would be more integrated, like more of the same part, or would they
Same
still
part
be?
of the brain. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So so that kind of goes with like a lot of people talk about like a critical age for language learning. So like the best time to learn a language is somewhere before age 12, but obviously like a lot of us, like myself, I've been looking to learn a lot of languages like after that. I'm 16 now and I've only just started learning a lot of languages. How would you say why would you say that's going to be more challenging for me than say for someone who is in elementary school to start learning another language?
Well, as I said, the earlier you learn the language, the easier it would be for, and the faster it would be. For example, for a baby who that's all it has is just input to his brain. he would learn it pretty much easier. But that doesn't mean, you know, it's a highly debated subject in neuroscience, this critical age, not only for the language, but the neuroplasticity, how you know, the flexibility of our brain. It's really debated. Some people would say that it's until, you know, when you for the language, and many other people say that it's until 30. Many others say that it doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much debated subject in neuroscience. But the thing that they know, the neuroscientists, is that the adults they can learn vocabulary and the language in general much better. They can learn it much better than, you know, somebody who's much younger. But somebody who's much younger will acquire it much better. So yeah, that the adults can learn it more efficiently, whereas the children can acquire it much easier.
Yeah. So I guess you could say like adults and people who aren't under the age of 12 or whatever it is have a certain advantage in that they can kind of like put themselves to a language and like study a language and understand the material, whereas like the younger person would have an advantage where, because their brain is just kind of a sponge at that point, can can acquire the language better. So I guess you could say that like older learners can learn the language, but like, and explain all the rules and things, but a kid's not going to know all the rules, but he's gonna use them. It won't make any difference. But
yeah, of course, you can't just expect a baby to sit there and tell him about I don't know the cases in the German language.
Yeah.
He wouldn't understand anything. But when you talk to him in German, he would be pretty much able to just understand it pretty much easy. Yeah.
Yeah. But hope is not lost for people who are over that age, because in a way that depending on what you want the language for, I suppose it could be different advantages to when you learn it, because like, for example, if you wanted to, I don't know how many people who want to just be like a grammarian in another language, but I mean, you would probably have a better shot at it if you just studied it from scratch later on in life. But yeah, I don't know how many. Most people just want to be able to speak it and understand it. But so
yeah, you know, and the thing is that as learning it as an adult, it would be a challenge learning a language, and I think that would pretty much help us with our memory and the executive functions that we are going to carry out. So I think that also has a benefit as learning it much later in life.
So
the challenge itself, yeah.
Yeah. So would you say that in Persia or Iran, like, how would you say that the school system played a large part in getting you where you are today with your English, or would you say that was mostly kind of self-study or just exposure to the language rather than studying it in school?
Well, absolutely the opposite, because the school system here and the way they teach English, I think it's absolutely not efficient, absolutely not. And the people who really want to learn English would go to an English institute, like I did before, some years ago, and from then on, I'm just learning it on my own. So I would say school has 100% not played any part in where I am now in the English language, and that the institute helped, but you know, they mostly spoke American English. But then later on, when I continued it on my own, I developed the British accent pretty much on myself. So yeah, I would say I helped myself the most.
Yeah. So yeah, if you just relied on your studies, then you'd still you wouldn't have the wonderful British accent that you have today. But yeah, so
Yeah,
from somebody who has like pretty well, from what I've seen, like mastered his second language, what would be the best pieces of advice that you could give people looking to learn a second language to the extent that you have, to be able to, you know, study neuroscience in it? That's like that's pretty complicated stuff, to learning your second language. And yeah.
so about learning a second language, I would say the most important thing is, okay, as I told you before, the things I do, one of them is thinking in that language and looking in the mirror and talking with myself. And so I think that's a really important part. Another thing I do, another technique for that is, let's say I'm watching a video on YouTube in Spanish. The thing I do is the person says a sentence, or some sentences, and then I would pause the video and I would just repeat the sentence. And this is actually a really good exercise, because at the same time it helps you with both listening and speaking. It's called shadowing. So at the same time you're listening and you have to understand all the things the speaker is saying, and at the same time it helps you with your speaking skills and your pronunciation, because you have to repeat the sentence, and that really helps. And you know, another thing that I would prefer to do is to talk with native speakers who speak the language. So, for example, for Spanish, I would talk with some of my friends who live in countries where Spanish is spoken as a first language, and that not only helps you with learning the language, but it also helps you with you know, the social interaction. Because another thing that neuroscience has discovered is that the people, pretty much the adults who learn the language, just, you know, sit somewhere, learn the language as a second language, and not having any, you know, interactions with the actual speakers and the culture of the country as a whole, they would have a much more rational view of the language. But for example, if a kid goes to Britain, for example, and starts learning English there and being in social interaction with them, or even me talking with my online friends, it would also help me to understand the emotional aspect of that language. So that's really important, both the emotional and the rational aspect.
Yeah. One thing I found to be like even just the most enjoyable, and what has kept me with language learning, is like just looking for like actual like enjoyable experiences that require the language. So yeah, whether I'm talking with my friends or watching videos on YouTube, like, because if it's all books, then you're gonna have very, yeah, like you said, a very rational view of the language, but it's gonna be pretty bland to you if you don't understand the culture and the people and kind of get into that. So that's really cool. And I had one question that actually just came to me. Is that I know a lot of people who have learned a language earlier on and or maybe still understand it fairly well, but when they try to speak it, it just doesn't work at all. Like they can't find the words. Would that mean that, like, for example, like the Broca's area would be like less developed than like than the Wernicke's or?
Well, that's also an excellent question to ask. Well, you know, it doesn't mean that the Broca's area is not developed, but it means that they need to practice speaking. As I said, talking with a person in English or in Spanish or any other language that you want to learn, speaking it, because our brain, it kind of has muscles. Like when you go to the gym, you have to activate, you have to strengthen the synapses in that Broca part when you want to talk in that language. And not only Broca, our brain is not just the language is not just associated with the Broca area and the Wernicke's area. It's pretty much all over the brain. But those are just two important parts. Practicing it, speaking it, especially, it will strengthen the synapses that are essential for speaking. And that's a skill. So for being better at that skill, you should practice it. And about not having, developed broca, actually, that's kind of an interesting question. There's something called the Broca's aphasia, and it doesn't mean it's not developed, but it's mostly results from a stroke in the brain mainly. And so, for example, the people that have a stroke in the brain, in Broca's part, the Broca's part, if it becomes impaired, then they, for example, you talk to me, my Broca's impaired. You talk to me, and I can understand what you're saying pretty much, but I can't produce a speech. I can't find the words to talk to you. So if that part of my brain literally becomes damaged, I wouldn't be able to talk to you easily. And another aphasia is Wernicke's aphasia, the other part of the brain that I told you. In that sense, in that case, you would be able to just fluently speak, but you would just say nonsense because you don't understand what the person's saying. You wouldn't understand what you're saying. So that would be pretty much, it's really crazy. So that's two different kinds of aphasia, and it differs from what part of the brain is damaged, and that's how neuroscientists have discovered how the brain works. These cases are the things from which neuroscientists can understand the functions of the brain. So that's how Broca, which was a scientist, discovered that part from the patient who had that Broca's aphasia, and also the same story was the same story with Wernicke.
Yeah, that's so strange how they're just two very different parts of the brain that do like super specific things, because I think that producing language and understanding it is such a similar process, but like in reality, like I could understand what you're saying and not be able to talk. Like like that's that's a weird thought.
But if one of them becomes damaged, that will produce those aphasias.
Yeah. And it'd be kind of strange to be able to speak but not understand what you're saying. Like, yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes I feel like I'm doing that, but no, in general, I feel like that would be quite a strange.
And a lot of times they are unaware of what has just happened to them. For example, when you show them, I don't know, let's say you show them a pen, and they say, "What is this called?" And he would say, for example, "Spenti." It's a made-up word. Spenti is not a pen. It's just a made-up word that he just made, and so they kind of struggle with it. Also with naming objects.
Yeah, that's crazy. But so yeah, I've burned through my questions a little faster than I intended. But anyways, yeah, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and it's been awesome talking to you, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure if I had more questions there would have been lots more, but yeah, but I did have one more question, because I noticed that when we were chatting earlier that I tended to be a little bit like culturally insensitive to a lot of like stereotypes like involving like Persian or Iranian people, and I was wondering like now that you're here, like what kinds of like Iranian or Persian like stereotypes like would you like to debunk or challenge?
Most importantly, that you're not Arabs. And that's the most important one. If I could debunk that, that would be enough. Yeah, because Persian and Arabic are two separate languages. Persian is from the Indo-European branch of the languages, in the same branch, like the big family of Indo-European languages that also includes English, French, Spanish, Hindi. All of them are in this language family. But Arabic belongs to another completely separate language family, which is called the Semitic languages, which also includes Hebrew. But we have, of course, a bunch of Arabic words used in Persian, and we write in the same script, except 4 letters, which they don't have, and we write But the languages are separate, and Arabic and somebody who speaks Arabic would definitely not be able to understand Persian.
Yeah. So yeah, because I was kind of was confused about that. I always thought that they would be very related because you see the script and you think, oh, it's Arabic, right? But no, it can be very different.
Exactly.
That's like if someone who didn't speak in a language that had the Latin script seeing Italian and saying, oh, look, it's English. Of course, you could probably tell because of the accent marks and things, but yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your time. It's been super interesting, and yeah, and it sounds like you've got big plans, and I'm excited for to if I can see where that goes, because yeah, and yeah, it looks like you've come a long way. You're very knowledgeable, and I hope that university and everything goes well for you once you graduate. So anyways, yeah, talk later then. See ya.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. Until next time.
See ya.